When humanity finally answered a call from the past, no one expected the entire galaxy to tremble. The signal came in the dead of night, a relic of a time long forgotten. It wasn't just another anomaly. It was ancient, encoded in a language that hadn't been spoken in millennia, one that humanity itself barely remembered. Deep within the archives of the United Earth Historical Division, a discovery was made. A scholar cross-referenced the signal structure with old Earth records and found something remarkable. A promise. Thousands of years ago, long before humanity had even left its own solar system, an alien race had come to Earth's aid. The Threxians, an advanced civilization, had intervened when a cataclysmic event threatened to wipe out early human societies. No one knew the details, history had buried them beneath centuries of wars, collapses, and rebirths. But one thing was clear. Humanity had made a vow: one day, we will repay our debt. Now, after all these years, the call had finally come. The mission begins. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Resolute, watching the coordinates of the distress signal illuminate on the holographic display. He and his crew had been sent as an exploration and relief force, their mission simple: investigate, make contact, and, if possible, honor the promise written into their ancestors' history. Most of the crew dismissed it as nothing more than a legend. Even the United Earth Council had debated whether it was worth the resources. But Elias felt something deep in his gut. This wasn't just an old story. It was real. And he intended to prove it. Arrival at the Forgotten World. As the Resolute dropped out of hyperspace, the sight before them was horrifying. The planet Threxia Prime, once a jewel of civilization, was in ruins. The cities were burning, the skies thick with smoke. Ships descended like predatory birds, bombarding the surface with merciless efficiency. It was a slaughter. On the main screen, the fleet's insignia became clear: the Drax Dominion. A cold silence filled the bridge. The Dominion was the most feared empire in the known galaxy, an expansionist force that crushed anything in its path. They saw other species as lesser beings, meant to either serve or be erased. Elias clenched his jaw. The Threxians had once saved Earth from destruction. Now, they were the ones facing annihilation. The final moment of choice. "Captain," said Lieutenant Hayes, his voice tight. "Orders from Earth Command. They want us to observe but not engage. They say we can't risk provoking the Dominion." Elias stared at the transmission, his hands tightening into fists. "Observe." He looked back at the burning world below, the desperate cries over the comms. This was more than just another conflict. It was humanity's debt, come due. A decision had to be made. "Stand by," Elias said. His next words would change the fate of the galaxy. Captain Elias Carter stood rigid on the Resolute's bridge, staring at the carnage unfolding on the viewscreen. Threxia Prime burned below. The Drax Dominion ships carved through the planet's defenses like knives through paper. The Threxians, once mighty, were on the verge of extinction. The order from Earth Command was clear: observe. Do not engage. Elias's crew watched him, waiting. He could feel the tension in the air. Some of them believed in the mission's historical significance. Others thought they were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives. Elias took a deep breath. He knew one thing for certain: if they turned away now, humanity would forever be known as an oathbreaker. He exhaled sharply. "Comms, open a channel to the Threxian command frequency." A hesitant pause. "Captain, we risk making ourselves a target." "Do it." A few seconds passed before the connection stabilized. The screen flickered, revealing a Threxian general, bloodied, his armor scorched from battle. The figure weakly looked up, eyes widening at the sight of a human officer. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the United Earth ship Resolute," Elias said. "We received your distress signal. Tell me what you need." The Threxian let out a rasping breath. They have broken our lines. We have civilians underground, thousands of them. The Dominion will show no mercy. If there is anything you can do. The transmission cut to static. Elias turned to his crew. The silence was deafening. He had his answer. Breaking the chains. Helm, plot a course into the atmosphere. We're going in. Shock rippled through the bridge. Captain, Earth Command will have us court-martialed for this. Lieutenant Hayes argued. Elias met his gaze. Then we better make it worth it. A beat passed. Then, one by one, the officers nodded. Aye, Captain. The Resolute roared toward the battlefield. Alarms blared as Dominion warships detected the unexpected arrival. Elias activated the ship's broadband transmission, broadcasting to both enemy and ally alike. This is Captain Elias Carter of the United Earth ship Resolute. The Threxians once saved our ancestors. Humanity repays its debts. Any Dominion forces in our path will be met with force. Stand down. The response was immediate. Dominion fighters swarmed toward them, ready to annihilate the lone human vessel. Elias turned toward tactical. Fire. The first shot. The Resolute's cannons unleashed hell. Energy beams tore through the enemy squadrons, cutting them down before they could reach the planet's surface. The Dominion fleet, initially caught off guard, scrambled to counter the unexpected resistance. Threxian ground forces, witnessing the human intervention, rallied with newfound hope. Across the battlefield, war horns blared as survivors took up arms once more. For the first time in decades, the Dominion faced something they hadn't anticipated, a species that refused to stand by and watch. A turning tide. As the battle raged on, Elias knew one thing: they couldn't win alone. Reinforcements were needed. But Earth Command had already washed its hands of the situation. He had one shot to change that. Comms, open a direct line to the United Earth Council. The next words he spoke would shake the fate of humanity itself. The Resolute shook violently as enemy fire grazed its shields. Sparks flew across the bridge, but Captain Elias Carter stood firm, his eyes locked on the communications officer. Is the connection open? He demanded. The young officer hesitated. Yes, sir. We're live to Earth Command, and the entire United Earth Council. Elias took a steadying breath. He knew what this meant. There would be no going back after this. The view screen flickered, and the image of Chancellor Adrienne Vasquez, leader of the United Earth Council, appeared. Her face was stern, her gaze unyielding. Captain Carter, she said coolly. You are violating direct orders. Stand down immediately and withdraw your ship from this conflict. Elias straightened his uniform. Chancellor, he said, his voice calm but resolute, with all due respect, I refuse. Gasps filled the council chamber behind Vasquez. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You do understand what you're saying? She asked. You are committing an act of defiance against the highest authority of the United Earth government. Elias took a slow breath. Then, with deliberate precision, he reached over and activated the ship's battle recorder, linking the live transmission to every civilian network in human space. I understand perfectly, Chancellor. But do you? He gestured toward the battlefield, broadcasting the burning planet, the massacred civilians, the desperate Threxian warriors fighting against impossible odds. Do you remember what this species did for us? Elias continued, his voice rising. When the last remnants of old Earth lay in ruins, when we had nothing left, it was the Threxians who opened their arms and gave us sanctuary. It was they who took in our starving ancestors and made sure humanity survived. He turned to the camera directly. And now, when they need us the most, we turn our backs. We let them be slaughtered because it's not our fight? What does that make us? A hush fell over the council chamber. Across human space, billions of civilians, soldiers, and leaders watched in silence. The weight of history bore down on them all. The council's dilemma. Vasquez remained composed, but Elias could see the hesitation behind her eyes. "Captain," she said slowly, "humanity's survival depends on careful diplomacy. If we interfere, we risk war with the Dominion. Are you prepared to bear that burden?" Elias's jaw tightened. "War isn't coming, Chancellor. It's already here." He pointed at the screen. "The Dominion won't stop with the Threxians. They conquer, they consume, and then they move on. If we wait for them to reach our colonies, it will be too late." For the first time, Vasquez's mask cracked. The chamber behind her erupted into whispers and arguments. The tide was shifting. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. A desperate gamble. The Resolute shook again as another barrage slammed into the shields. Elias turned to his crew. "Status? Shields at 40%, Captain. We won't hold much longer." Elias looked back at Vasquez. "You want to wait for war to come to our doorstep? Fine. But my crew and I, we refuse to be remembered as cowards. We're staying. We're fighting." He cut the transmission. The bridge fell into silence. Lieutenant Hayes looked at him. "Sir, what if they don't send reinforcements?" Elias exhaled. "Then we make our stand right here." Outside, the Dominion fleet repositioned for a final strike. The Resolute hovered alone, a single ship standing between an empire and the last remnants of an old ally. Elias took his seat. "Prepare all weapons." He had made his choice. Now it was up to the rest of humanity to make theirs. The Resolute hung in the void, its battered hull gleaming in the dim light of the burning Threxian world below. The Dominion fleet loomed ahead, their weapons primed for destruction. No reinforcements had come. Captain Elias Carter took a slow breath. "All weapons online?" Lieutenant Hayes swallowed hard. "Aye, Captain. But against a fleet of this size." "We hold," Elias said firmly. "We hold the line." The Dominion commander's voice crackled over the comms. "Foolish humans. Your sacrifice means nothing. Surrender, and we will grant you a quick death." Elias cut the channel. "Target their lead battleship," he ordered. A pause. "Sir? If this is how we go down fighting." The crew tensed, but before Elias could give the order to fire, a sudden alert flashed across the view screen. "Incoming warp signatures." Elias's heart pounded. He turned to Hayes. "Is it?" Hayes checked his console. His breath caught. "Sir, multiple human vessels inbound. Battlecruisers, carriers." He turned in shock. "The fleet is coming." Humanity's answer. Across the system, space ripped open as hundreds of human warships emerged from hyperspace. The United Earth Fleet, bigger than any seen in a century, had arrived. The lead vessel, the UES Valiant, hailed them. A familiar voice filled the bridge. "Captain Carter. I hope we're not too late." Elias felt his chest tighten. "Chancellor Vasquez." "Chancellor," he said, stunned. You sent the fleet?" The Chancellor's face appeared on screen. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice was steady, resolute. "You're right, Captain. We owed a debt. Humanity never forgets its debts." The battle begins. The Dominion commander barked orders, and the alien fleet began shifting formations. But this was no longer a one-sided fight. "All ships," Vasquez commanded. "Engage at will." The battle erupted. Human warships unleashed a storm of fire, tearing through Dominion ranks. Fighters swarmed, missiles streaked, and beams of energy sliced through enemy hulls. Elias gripped his chair. Target their command vessel. Full power. The Resolute surged forward, weapons blazing. The tide had turned. And for the first time in a century, humanity fought not for survival, but for honor. The Dominion fleet was faltering. Their ships were scattered, their once imposing formation now in disarray. The UES Valiant, with its massive hull and nearly impenetrable armor, led the charge, ramming through the alien ships with unrelenting force. The Dominion, unaccustomed to facing such fierce resistance, had underestimated humanity's resolve. Captain Elias Carter stood at the helm of the Resolute, his hands gripping the command console. The battle was chaotic, flashing lights illuminating the bridge as the ship rocked under heavy fire. But for the first time in days, he felt a sense of hope, something he hadn't dared to allow himself. "Captain, we're taking heavy fire from the left flank," Lieutenant Hayes shouted. "Shields are down to 40%. Elias didn't flinch. "Hold steady, Lieutenant. We've got this." His words felt like a vow, not just to his crew, but to all of humanity. They had waited for this moment for so long, and now they would make sure it counted. The price of victory. The Dominion's lead flagship, the Dominus, fired a massive cannon directly at the Valiant. The impact was devastating, sending shockwaves throughout the fleet. One of the Valiant's engines sputtered, and its speed dropped drastically. The massive warship was vulnerable. "Chancellor Vasquez." Elias called over the comms. "Your flagship is in danger." Her face appeared on the screen, calm yet resolute. "We're not backing down, Captain. Not now, not ever." The enemy fleet regrouped, launching a full-on assault against the Valiant, aiming to end the battle quickly by eliminating its strongest ship. Elias knew that if they didn't act fast, the tide could turn again. "Prepare for a strategic strike," Elias commanded, and the crew snapped into action. With the Resolute alongside the Valiant, the two ships formed a defensive wall, holding off the Dominion's advances. But it wasn't enough. Just as the Dominus fired another devastating blast, a streak of light cut through the darkness, a new human ship emerged from hyperspace. It was the Invictus, a legendary warship, considered a myth in human history. Once thought lost in an ancient war, it had been reconstructed and brought back to humanity's side. And it was more advanced than anything the Dominion had seen. The Invictus unleashed a massive EMP wave, stunning the Dominion fleet. Its weapons fired relentless beams of energy, obliterating the enemy ships that came too close. The Dominion fleet began to scatter, losing formation, and Elias felt the weight of the moment lift. A message from humanity. With the Dominion on the run, Chancellor Vasquez transmitted a message to the entire galaxy. "To the galaxy, hear this, humanity has paid its debt. We will not be conquered. We will not be slaves. And we will stand, united, against anyone who threatens us or our allies." The words echoed across the stars, carried by every broadcast frequency, every communication relay. The Dominion now knew humanity's resolve. This was no longer a one-sided war. This was a new era. As the last of the Dominion fleet turned tail and fled into deep space, the Invictus joined the others in holding formation around the Valiant. The battle was won, but there was no time to celebrate. "Damage report?" Elias asked. Hayes looked up. "Minor damage, sir. We've made it through. But there's more to come." Elias nodded. He knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was in shock. The Dominion had never imagined that humanity, mere humans, could strike so decisively. Their fleet, once imposing, was now scattered in pieces across the void, retreating into the unknown. But victory came at a steep price. The Valiant, though battered, had survived the worst of the battle. The Resolute had fared somewhat better, but not without damage. Captain Elias Carter stood at the helm of his ship, surveying the damage reports with a sense of grim determination. "Sir, damage control reports are coming in," Lieutenant Hayes announced. "We've lost 3 auxiliary engines, and our shield systems are down to 35%. We'll need time to regroup." Elias took a deep breath, nodding. The battle had been intense, but it was far from the end. The Dominion was wounded, but they were not defeated, not yet. He turned his gaze to the screen, where Chancellor Vasquez stood, her face a mixture of relief and resolve. "We've won the day, Captain. But we must prepare for what comes next," she said. "The Dominion won't take this lightly. They'll come back, stronger, more ruthless." Elias nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The Dominion would return, and humanity would have to be ready. They had repaid the debt, but the real battle was just beginning. A turning point in the war. In the weeks that followed, the human forces worked tirelessly to repair and strengthen their fleet. The Invictus had been instrumental in turning the tide, but even with its advanced technology, humanity's resources were stretched thin. There was a sense of urgency in the air as everyone knew that the next move would determine the fate of the galaxy. Meanwhile, Dominion commanders were in disarray. Their strategy had failed, and their fleets were retreating to regroup. But even as they licked their wounds, a new figure emerged in the ranks, Supreme Commander Rylac, a name that sent chills down the spines of every human officer who heard it. Rylac was ruthless. A tactician of unparalleled skill, he had risen through the Dominion ranks after the loss of their previous commanders. His reputation was one of fear and respect, and now he was poised to lead the Dominion back into battle. Elias felt a deep sense of foreboding as intelligence reports came in, outlining Rylac's plans. The Dominion had shifted their focus, they would no longer attempt to conquer humanity through brute force alone. Instead, they would use deception, subterfuge, and betrayal to weaken their enemies, targeting human alliances and turning them against each other. The suspense of the upcoming battle weighed heavily on everyone's shoulders. The Dominion had learned from their mistakes and adapted. Humanity's resilience would be tested in ways they hadn't yet imagined. The human spirit. Despite the looming threat, there was a newfound strength in humanity. The once fragmented factions, each with their own interests, now stood united. The human race had repaid a debt, not just to their ancestors but to the galaxy itself. And now they would protect their way of life at all costs. Elias stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, looking out at the stars. The galaxy was still beautiful, vast, uncharted, and full of possibilities. But it was also dangerous, more so than ever before. "We've repaid a debt," he murmured to himself, thinking of the countless lives lost in the war. But the real fight begins now. Behind him, the door slid open, and Chancellor Vasquez stepped in, her eyes hard with determination. "We've prepared as much as we can, Elias," she said. "The Dominion won't be defeated easily, but we've done what we needed to do." Elias nodded, meeting her gaze. They both knew that sacrifices would be made, but humanity's spirit would never waver. "We've come this far," Elias said quietly. "We can't stop now." A new strategy. The next phase of the war was one of guerrilla tactics and strategic deception. Rylac was a master at manipulating emotions and using fear against his enemies. But the humans had something Rylac didn't, the strength of their unity. Under the command of Elias and Vasquez, the human fleet engaged in covert operations, striking Dominion supply lines and using their advanced technology to gain the upper hand. Every victory was hard-earned, but each one was a step toward crippling the Dominion's war machine. But despite their successes, the humans knew the real battle was still ahead. Rylac was preparing something that would test humanity like never before. His next move would be the one that would change the course of the war. As Part 6 draws to a close, humanity stands on the precipice of its greatest test yet. The Dominion may have been pushed back, but the galaxy still trembles at the thought of what's to come. The galaxy had never seen a war quite like this one. Humanity had always been underestimated, dismissed as a race too young, too naive, to stand up against the ancient powers of the cosmos. But they had proven themselves, time and again, against the Dominion. Yet, the final battle was approaching, and this time, it would be unlike any challenge they had faced before. A time of reckoning. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the stars flicker beyond the viewport. The battle ahead would decide the fate of humanity, and the weight of that responsibility felt heavier with each passing day. The Dominion was massing its forces, and Supreme Commander Rylak had devised a strategy so cunning, so ruthless, that even the best of humanity's commanders were unsure if they could survive it. It had been months since the Dominion's retreat, and during that time, the human fleet had been rebuilding, but supplies were dwindling, and resources were stretched thin. The unrelenting war of attrition was taking its toll on every living soul. In the council chamber, Chancellor Vasquez addressed the leaders of the remaining human factions, her voice firm, yet tinged with the understanding of the gravity of the situation. The time for negotiation had passed. Now, the galaxy's future lay in the hands of those willing to sacrifice everything to defend it. The Dominion thinks they can crush us with one final strike, she said. But they don't understand the power of unity. We're not just fighting for our survival, we're fighting for the future of everything we hold dear. There was no turning back now. It was do or die. And humanity had never been more determined. A moment of reflection. Before the battle began, Elias walked to the observation deck alone. Victory and defeat had always seemed so abstract to him before this war, but now, as he stared out at the stars, he understood what it truly meant. Every life lost, every sacrifice made, had brought them to this moment. It wasn't just about defeating an enemy, it was about ensuring that the future would be brighter for those who came after. Elias thought back to the very beginning of this journey, the debt humanity had owed, the way they had been pushed to the brink of extinction. But humans were resilient. And now, they were fighting not just for their own survival, but for the survival of every life in the galaxy. His mind turned to the crew of the Resolute. Lieutenant Hayes, who had been with him since the first battle, had lost family in the war. Commander Juno, the brilliant tactician, had sacrificed everything to get them this far. And then there was Chancellor Vasquez, whose political acumen and resolve had guided them through the hardest decisions. This was not just the story of a war, it was the story of people, of those who refused to bow to the might of the Dominion, who held on to hope when all seemed lost. The final battle. The Dominion's fleet arrived with all the fury of a galaxy that had never known such a storm. The Resolute and the Valiant led the charge, flanked by human allies, their ships gleaming with the scars of past battles. The air on the bridge of the Resolute was thick with anticipation. The final battle was about to begin. Rylak had come, as predicted, with a weapon more devastating than anything humanity had encountered. His fleet was equipped with a new technology, an infinite energy core, capable of devastating entire fleets in a single shot. The human forces were outnumbered and outgunned, but there was one thing the Dominion didn't understand: humans never gave up. The opening salvo was deafening. Explosions rocked the ships as human and Dominion forces collided in a fiery clash that lit up the heavens. Elias could feel the tension in every fiber of his being. This was it. This was their moment. Prepare to launch, Elias ordered. All ships, engage at full power. We can't let them take another inch. The human fleet, bolstered by its unity in the lessons of countless past battles, charged forward with renewed fury. As the Dominion's ships unleashed their devastating energy blasts, the humans dodged and weaved with incredible precision, pushing their ships to the absolute limit. Rylak's fleet was ruthless, but the human spirit proved more formidable. The twist. As the battle raged, a twist no one had expected occurred. A hidden human fleet, led by none other than General Harlan, a veteran of the earlier battles, emerged from a previously uncharted system. They had been lying in wait, using covert stealth technology to remain undetected until the right moment. With the new fleet joining the fray, the balance of power shifted. The Dominion's energy core, their final trump card, began to malfunction, causing massive energy surges that sent shockwaves across the battlefield. Rylak's forces scrambled to contain the damage, but it was too late. In the chaos, a human squadron led by Lieutenant Hayes launched a desperate strike on Rylak's flagship, the Ascendant. It was an attack born of sheer desperation, but it paid off. As the Ascendant's shields faltered, the flagship was critically damaged. The final sacrifice. In the aftermath of the battle, it was clear, the Dominion had been defeated. Rylak, once a feared commander, had fallen. The galaxy's balance had been restored, and humanity had repaid its debt in full. But victory came at a great cost. The Resolute, though victorious, had lost too many good men and women. Lieutenant Hayes, the ever-loyal officer who had been at Elias' side since the beginning, was among the fallen. As Elias stood over her memorial, he realized that the greatest strength humanity had wasn't its weapons or technology, it was the heart. It was the willingness to fight for each other, to never give up, even when the odds were impossible. It was the human spirit, a force that no one, not even the most powerful empire in the galaxy, could ever destroy. A life-affirming conclusion. Elias looked up at the stars, the vastness of the galaxy stretching out before him. The war was over, but the true challenge had just begun, to rebuild, to heal, and to never forget what they had learned. "We've repaid the debt," he whispered to himself, a tear slipping down his cheek. "Now, we make sure it was worth it." As the human fleet returned home, the galaxy was left in awe of what humanity had achieved. Not with overwhelming power, not with technology or warships, but with something far more enduring. With hope, unity, and the unwavering belief that, no matter the odds, humanity would always rise.